KSC, presents. A man said his family blamed him for his grandpa's death. Then 14 years on he told them the truth. More often than not, we can rely on our family to support us through challenging times. However, the same couldn't be said for an unfortunate young man who was blamed by his parents for the death of his grandfather. After 14 years, though, he finally told them the truth about what had happened on that fateful day. The man, who was a teenager at the time, was looking after his ailing grandpa at the family home. The latter was a polio survivor, but due to several other ailments he regularly found himself in and out of hospital. As a result of his condition, EMTs were required to revive him on a number of occasions to keep the elderly man alive. It seems that these parents also held the teenager responsible for not attempting to revive his grandfather once he had found him unresponsive. What they didn't know, though, was that their son was carrying a painful secret about what had apparently happened that day. Indeed, following 14 years of silence on the matter, the now 28-year-old felt the need to unload his burden. It seems that these parents also held the teenager responsible for not attempting to revive his grandfather once he had found him unresponsive. What they didn't know, though, was that their son was carrying a painful secret about what had apparently happened that day. Indeed, following 14 years of silence on the matter, the now 28-year-old felt the need to unload his burden. Taking to the internet, the man wrote up an anonymous post, revealing what had happened from his point of view. The way I tell the story is kinda nonchalant, the 28-year-old poster said, before speaking of the blame placed upon him by his parents. After recounting the struggles that his grandfather had faced, the author then made a confession. His elderly relative, the poster said, had grown tired of his life, citing constant trips to the hospital and the subsequent treatments he had received. With that in mind, he summoned his grandson to his room one day. Armed with an important piece of paper, the grandfather passed it on to the teen before explaining what it meant. He revealed that it was a Do Not Resuscitate order, better known as a DNR. This is a legal document that prohibits doctors and hospitals from resuscitating the person in question if their heart stops beating. With the DNR in his possession, the now grown man then revealed his grandfather's reasoning for giving the document to him back then. He told me that he could trust anyone in my family with his life, but I was the only one that he could trust with his death, the man wrote. A short while after that conversation took place, though, he was called to his elderly relative's room once again. Informed by his grandfather that he wasn't feeling well, the post's author claimed that he then sat next to the elderly man's bed as he suffered a heart attack. While that was happening, he also held his relative to prevent him from falling off the mattress. The teenage boy then stayed by his grandpa's side until he stopped breathing, before making his next move. The man wrote that he then picked his grandfather up and put him on the floor, observing his condition for the next hour or so. And when the color had completely drained from the elderly man's face, the teenager dialed 911 to report his relative's passing. Due to the pair's previous conversation, though, the boy didn't call his parents to tell them what had happened. As a result, the author's parents arrived at the house just a few moments after the emergency services, none the wiser about the tragic plan their son had helped put into practice. And while the 28-year-old ended his anonymous post on that note, he was more than happy to expand on the situation when asked a number of questions by curious internet users. The poster revealed that although his family was religious, neither he nor his grandfather followed that particular path. With that in mind, he believed that only the two of them could understand the situation. Nobody but me would ever accept a person wanting to die, the 28-year-old wrote. That's why he chose me. Surprisingly, the anonymous author faced questions regarding his mindset over the 14 years that followed, particularly since he had had to keep such a heartbreaking secret to himself. It was so long ago that I've had time to cope and think about what happened and how it changed me, he responded. I'm comfortable speaking about it now. Just because I talk about it without outward remorse doesn't mean that it didn't happen, the author continued. It just means I've accepted it. The focus then shifted to the man's parents, with one user in particular asking why they had entrusted him with looking after his sick grandfather at such a young age. However, the 28-year-old refused to condemn his mom and dad. It wasn't their fault, the author answered. They were ignorant as to what was going on. Blinded by love. From there, he revealed another intriguing twist in the story. As it turned out, his parents were in fact aware of the DNR, but they didn't know that his grandfather wanted to die. When another user questioned his grandpa's decision to place a teenage boy in that situation, the anonymous poster responded strongly. I was given the option, but I decided to go through with it, he said. I accepted the possible consequences, and I didn't really care if my whole family hated me and thought that I had murdered him. It was all worth it and I'd do it again, the 28-year-old added. It is not messed up at all that he asked me to do it. Several users backed the man's stance on the matter, with one in particular hailing him as a hero for honoring his grandfather's wishes. User Halcyon142 wrote, "That would have taken a toll on me if I'd had to go through that in my teen years. At least you honored his wishes." That feeling was reiterated by fellow user Justthoughtemino who wrote, "Being a hero doesn't always come with medals and hugs. You did the right thing for a loved member of your family. I salute you." Elsewhere, another user, named Knife Eyes, focused their attention on the man's grandfather. It's sad that he couldn't discuss his end-of-life wishes with your parents, they wrote. Everyone deserves to die with dignity. From there, one final comment supported the now adult man's apparent actions on that day 14 years ago, and the remark came from an interesting source. As a nurse who works in cardiac ICU, well done, wrote Beerer. Seriously. With the DNR, what you did was legal, right, and what he wanted. So, after bearing the burden for over a decade, this grandson's secret is finally out. Despite that, though, it remains to be seen if his parents' mindset will finally change as a result. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe.